If you need to file GST, you're in a pretty good spot because you've at least earned more than 30,000 in the year. The GST HST rules do not need to be complicated. This is how you'll figure out whether you need to file and remit GST. When to register and start charging for GST and HST, aka when do you have to remit GST and HST to the government of Canada? When do you have to file GST returns? Are you exempt from it? So there are specific rules here, the one being a small supplier being the most important one here. Whether you are self-employed, aka a sole proprietor, or you are an incorporated business. So we're looking at both of these type of businesses. Do you need to register for a GST or HST account? So we're going to go down here, and depending on your business, you'll find the appropriate section. If you are just most businesses, then this will apply to most of you. So you'll find out if you're a small supplier, if you have to register for the GST or HST and your effective date of registration. AKA, if you do need to register for GST or HST, when do you need to register? What date? So the $30,000 threshold is the rule, okay? In very simple terms, if you make less than $30,000 in the year, you do not need to file GST or HST. And you don't need to collect it and remit it to the Canadian government. Now, there are very specific rules to how you can calculate it, and this is what we're going to talk about more in detail. So if you do not exceed the 30,000 threshold on 4 consecutive calendar years, you are a small supplier and you do not have to register. You can choose to register voluntarily if you wanted to. Why would you do that? Makes no sense to me. Why would you want the added work of collecting GST and remitting it to the Canadian government? Maybe if you're in a loss position and you're making big losses and you want to recover some of that ITC credit, then it would make sense. But to me, that just sounds like a headache and it's not worth it. So if you're under 30,000, why bother, registering for a GST or HST account? Don't do it to yourself. The second rule is if you exceed 30,000 in a single calendar year, you are no longer a small supplier. Well, if I make 35,000 a year, that's more than 30,000. That means that I will have to register for GST or HST. And you will have the registration date no later than the day the supply you made exceeded 30,000. So we're going to look at when did we pass that 30,000 threshold mark. If it was in June, then we need to start filing. We need to file a GST or register for GST account as of June. And we'll have to do a GST return for that year. So we'll have to backtrack how much more we did. So if, for example, we had 35,000 and we had $5,000 more, on that 5,000, we'll need to collect GST. So for example, it would be 5%. If you're in an HST one, it can be 13%. So we would essentially owe the government $250 because it's 5,000. So you have to start charging GST on the supply that you made that exceeded 30,000. If you exceed 30,000 threshold over the previous 4 or fewer consecutive calendar years, but not a single calendar quarter, you are still no longer a small supplier at the end of the month, and you'll still need to register for a GST HST account. Now they have examples here. You can see in the last 4 quarters, none of the quarters exceeded 30,000. The last 4 quarters don't make more than 30,000. You do not need to file a GST return. You are a small supplier. Here you can see in the third quarter, we actually have 38,000 in 1 year because it's the rule. It's the second rule. When you exceed 30,000 in a single quarter, you will stop being a small supplier and you'll have an effective date no longer than the day you made the amount to exceed 30,000. Here you have exceeded 30,000 in 2 consecutive calendar years, 25 and 25. So now you stop being a small supplier on April 30th because that is the day end of the month after the quarter you exceeded it, and you'll have an effective date or registration on May 1st, 2020. So you can go in and look at the examples, but in very plain and simple terms, you're looking at when did you cross that 30,000 threshold. Crossed it in the year, you will have a GST requirement or HST requirement, depending on exactly where you are. So here is a list of exactly all the provinces, whether they have GST and HST and PST. So in British Columbia, you have GST and HST. There's actually no HST, it's just GST of 5%, and they have a provincial tax of 7%. If you go down to Ontario, it's 13% of HST, and there's no PST. So when you're filing an HST return, it's the same as the GST return, except it'll be on 13%. So your credits will also be on 13%. So I do want to explain something right now in a very simple terms. So the way that GST works is you must collect GST in the province of sale that is made. So for example, if I run a business in Ontario and I make a sale in Ontario, then I have to claim or collect 13% from the customer. Okay. But if I make a sale in BC, then I would have to collect 5% of GST for that customer. To simplify it, if you're just an Ontario business and all you do is sales in Ontario, then you're collecting GST on all your sales. Let's say we manufacture something. Okay, we manufacture something and we charge that GST at the end to the consumer. But we purchase and we pay HST because we're on Ontario. We pay HST on the supplies to create the product, the final product. That means that we get a credit for which we paid. So we're not going to double tax. We're not going to have HST paid for all the supplies needed to create a product, in which case we actually sell to the consumer at the end and they pay the HST on it. We can get a credit. We can claim the credit on the HST there and see whether there's a difference. So let's say I have credits of $100 and I've collected HST of $100, then that nets out to zero. If I have credits of 500 and I collected HST of 1,000, then I owe the government 500, the difference. And again, you can also get a refund. Maybe you collected 1,000, but you have ITC credits of 2,000, then you get $1,000 back. Okay, so that's how it works. If you're not sure how to figure out where it is, how to supply the effect based on where they are, you can see examples here and you can get an understanding of exactly in which province you want to file. But most of you'll only be working out of one province and having only sales in one province. I do want to mention a big thing that happens on your HST return is when your sales are higher than the amount you collect, that generally creates an audit. But that makes sense if you are selling outside of Canada as well. So then if you sell in the United States, you're not going to be collecting GST, HST. And because of that, you would just let them know if you do get audited that is the reason you have sales outside of Canada that you haven't collected. That's why it doesn't add up to the correct percentage. So that's how you know when to charge and collect GST and the rate you use. Make sure you do register. There's a lot of information regarding how to register for an account you can see here. So you can see how to get a GST number, and you can see the pin about how to actually create an account, as well as you can find the drop down to figure out how to file your GST return. So one thing I will mention here is once you do cross that path of 30,000, you must register for a GST or HST number. And then once you get that number, that's when you file your return. So there will be a delay. You cannot file your return, your HST GST return, without having that number. Okay. So what will happen in the year, you'll find out, oh, I have a GST obligation, HST obligation, and you're most likely going to have to backtrack it. So what'll happen is maybe you didn't know at the end of the year that you reached that 30,000 threshold. You will immediately apply for a GST, HST number. Once you get the number, then you'll file your GST, HST return, and you'll find out how much you actually have to remit to them for the amount excess of 30,000. If you have any questions, do let me know. GST, HST may be a more complex area for you. Let me know in the comment section below. Remember, this is general information, not personalized tax advice. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more tax-related videos